Genshin Impact has many aspects of gameplay: combat, deep stories, gambling, more gambling, fishing, and of course, exploration. With the release of Xianyun, another contender is added to the best exploration character discussions and arguments. But who really is the best character for exploration? Of course, that question can be considered irrelevant if you just do but that leads to a whole other discussion of what is the best loadout of exploration characters, since you'll have to include passives and whatnot. Whoa, nice loadout, buddy. Guess you don't care about mining ores. So let's focus on the capabilities of a single character, focusing on their main exploration abilities. What exactly in their kit makes exploration easier, ease of use, how easy or intuitive it is to use their abilities, and niche. By niche, I refer to the different forms of exploration, vertical and horizontal. Vertical exploration includes mountain climbing and platforming, while horizontal exploration refers to running. Gliding falls under both as you move forward as you glide, and the amount of height you start with can affect whether you reach your goal. While this list will have what I consider to be the best exploration characters, it's more so figuring out what each exploration character has to offer with some comparisons. And for all intents and purposes of this video, an exploration character is a character who has a skill that's clearly meant for making traversal easier. Another way to put it is that when you think, I'm about to go spend the next hour exploring in this game, I'm going to need these characters. Was your first thought really Zhongli's Pillar or Kaching's Hold E? Maybe, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, this is all my opinion, and it's not in any way meant to be a guide as to who you should pull regarding exploration, or in general.
Here we go!
The first limited banner character of the game, the Anemo Archon himself. Venti starts off this list with his elemental skill. After leveling him up to 70, holding his elemental skill creates an updraft that remains on the field for a few seconds. You can use this updraft to soar through the sky at a fixed height, about 1 Zhongli pillar and a half. The main appeal of this ability is obviously the temporary wind current. This was early in the game when the only other character whose skill can aid other players was Kaya's Ice Bridging, a character everyone gets for free. And while Kaya's skill aids in horizontal exploration, Venti's skill is completely tailored towards vertical exploration, helpful for the various cliffs in Mondstadt and the various mountains in Liyue at the time. Oh my god! In terms of speed, you'll need to wait about 15 seconds every time you use Venti's held skill. If you're scaling a particularly tall mountain and are willing to be patient, then Venti can overall make the beginner experience a bit less frustrating. All in all, Venti's skill is focused entirely on quality of life rather than pure speed. Considering when he first released, when casual players didn't have the maximum stamina immediately, unless you're that kind of player, his skill proved to be very helpful for getting across pesky hills and rewarded the patient player. It also made online interaction a bit more active, since the Venti players could show off to co-op players that climbing is for suckers. But that was version 1.0. Most players now already have the maximum amount of stamina, and it's unlikely newer players will join at the same time as Venti's rerun. And as we all know, new characters were added, and so were new ways of exploration. Here comes a wandering samurai from Inazuma. Released in version 1.6, people were kinda surprised by his quick and consistent grouping, great buffing capabilities, and the fact he could use his skill in midair. Okay, maybe just me. A friend of mine didn't even know you could use his skill in midair until I told him months ago. And to remind you, the only character who could do that was Zhao at the time. But what about Kazuha's skill itself? Upon press, he just propels himself into the air a short height. If you're on the ground, you can charge his skill to propel yourself even higher, at the cost of a slightly increased cooldown. When using Kazuha's skill in the air, its height is about the same as if you were to use it on the ground. So what exactly makes Kazuha's skill great and, in my opinion, better at traversal than Venti's? It's just comfy to use. It's basically a double jump with a short cooldown. Like Venti's, it allows you to scale walls easily, and its cooldown is about 5 seconds less. Not only that, Kazuha can also use his skill while scaling a wall, by simply letting go of the wall, jumping off of it, and immediately using his skill back towards the wall to relatch onto it. You climb a bit faster, recover a very slight amount of stamina, and it's not too difficult to do. In the air, Kazuha can use his skill to maintain a certain level of height, or recover a bit of stamina again if you delay redeploying your glider. While it lacks the co-op value and longevity of Venti's updraft, Kazuha offers faster and smoother traversal.
And away I go!
Gotcha!
Yeah, I don't have Yelan. I would, but I put the two characters in the same spot since they virtually have the same simple but effective function. Running really fast. There really isn't much else to say about them. The speed and distance in which these two can cover is astounding. The only thing I can discuss is who's really better. While Yelan's skill is overall faster and immediately reaches its maximum speed upon activation, it only lasts for about 3 to 4 seconds. Sayu has a longer skill duration at 10 seconds, and while a bit slower, will still cover more distance. In terms of cooldown, it's only slower in comparison to Yelan's by a second. Yelan can also recover stamina during her skill, whereas Sayu cannot. In the end, it depends on preference. Both of these characters still share the same drawback in which they do not offer anything when it comes to vertical exploration. They're purely race cars, but there's nothing wrong with that. But in my opinion, the best exploration characters are those who could do both.
Squall and Fury.
Wanderer was definitely a game changer. A flying state that can last for a total of 10 seconds locked behind only a cooldown of 6 seconds. And in this flying state, he can dash forward and even elevate himself to even greater heights. Like Yelan, he can also recover stamina during his skill, but at a much higher rate due to how long his skill lasts. He truly is the 3D glasses of exploration characters. And by 3D glasses, I mean Wanderer has a bit more complexity than other exploration characters, and by complexity, I mean having more than one option. So he does require a bit of thinking when it comes to using his elemental skill properly. When you first use him, he can feel a bit clunky, as he is truly the first of his kind with his own stamina bar. When you use Wanderer's skill to move horizontally, you have two options: sprinting while moving forward, or moving forward without dashing at all. The former is great for covering short distances at a respectable speed, while the latter sacrifices speed for more distance. The problem with Wanderer's skill is that when his Kuguryoku points run out, he just stops. No momentum is carried over when the duration of his skill ends and he drops to the ground like an anchor. It's unsatisfying to say the least. But what if I told you there's a third option? This brings us to this portion of the video I like to call Let's say these trees are roughly how far Wanderer can get with his skill. The leftmost tree is if you do not dash throughout his skill's duration. The rightmost is if you dash the whole time. But what's the middle tree? That's what I consider my go-to method when using Wanderer's skill. Dashing throughout his skill duration, but within the last few seconds, let go of dash, then press dash again for one last push. It's a good option if you feel that holding dash barely covers any distance, but you don't want to move so slow just to cover as much distance as possible. Does it always feel like Wanderer is smashing his face against a mountain slope when you fly against it? Well, if you simply let go of the move forward key and hold dash, you somehow move faster. I don't get why either. As I mentioned before, Wanderer can also rise in the air if you press jump during his skill. If you're trying to go as high as possible, holding jump is the least favorable option as it eats away at his Kuguryoku points heavily. That's why mashing jump is better since you can make more height. But there's another option. If you repeatedly press and hold a jump button for a little bit, you levitate the highest possible. However, it is the most difficult to pull off as it requires a rhythm. Now, you may be thinking, what's the point of these third extra options if they are mechanically more difficult and their payoff is barely noticeable? Well, in a game where you pretty much want to get everything done as fast as possible, whether it's dailies or exploring, any difference, no matter how small, can save you that extra second. And the best part is you're not exactly losing out on much if you don't use Wanderer's skill optimally. It's just that when compared to other exploration characters, there is definitely a skill ceiling to be had with him. But when you do reach that skill ceiling, you get the ability to switch between vertical and horizontal exploration on the fly. Ugh. In a nutshell, rather than specializing in one specific form of traversal, Wanderer has the best of both worlds. There are a few honorable mentions. These are characters that have potentially great exploration capabilities but are held back heavily by certain flaws. But if you have these characters and not the ones I just listed, why not use them? These include Zhao. His skill, as basic as it is, being a dash you can activate twice in a row, actually has some great utility. If you're running low on stamina as you climb a mountain or glide, you can use his dashes, given that you space out between each use, to recover a considerable amount. However, it takes 20 seconds in total for Zhao to use both of his dashes again, and in that time he's just like any other character in terms of traversal. Unless of course you use his burst for an increased jump height, but why? Kirara is another good exploration character who just doesn't quite make the cut. Her partial state, while faster than a character's standard walking speed, is about the same speed as continuously pressing dash. Her climbing speed is also great and uses much less stamina than you typically would. However, her partial state only lasts for about 10 seconds. While that is standard across most exploration characters, it also has a beefy cooldown of 12 seconds if you stay in it for that entire duration. Albedo's elevator, as funny as it looks, is pretty good actually. It's portable with only a cooldown of 4 seconds, but it's only really useful for starting a climb. Like Zhongli's pillar, it might be tough to ensure his elevator is exactly where you need it to be, even when aiming. Keqing and the new Chiori share the same aiming mechanic with their skills, but I would pit Keqing higher than Chiori since the latter's skill down is 16 seconds while Keqing's is only 7. Both have the same issue of requiring a bit of positioning when climbing mountains to ensure their reticles don't get stuck on said mountain, which may be more trouble than it's worth.
What? A cursory change in one's appearance and you barely recognize me. Then let one dispel any doubt. One is in all things.
She's not stopping, is she? Xianyun coincidentally released at the same time with a new portion of Liyue to explore, meaning more mountains. Fortunately, that meant Xianyun havers could practice optimizing her movement, and Xianyun's movement is really good. A triple jump that isn't encumbered by slopes or tall mountains, which works just as well on flat ground. The reason for that is how her skill's leaps easily adapt to whatever surface. Mountain faces, slants, rivers, it's all practically the same to her. Her skill's cooldown, while 12 seconds, begins as soon as she casts her first leap, meaning it's actually 9 or 10 seconds at most. There isn't much of a skill ceiling either. Just avoid mashing and try delaying each leap as much as possible to cover the most distance. You can also steer Xianyun as you glide through the air, making her landing more precise. Compared to Wanderer, what makes Xianyun feel much nicer is that her momentum from skill to basic movement flows seamlessly, and it never feels like you halt at any point. And to top it off, Xianyun also recovers a bit of stamina when she uses her skill. She's a complete package without all of the work. So that's my list of all the characters I consider to be the best at exploring. But to be honest, it's less of who is best and more clearing up the air as to what makes each of these characters great at what they do. Despite them fulfilling the same role, comparing their value to each other can sometimes be apples to oranges, or even grapes. There's so many aspects to Genshin's exploration. Maybe you need a character to mine all of the new ores in a new region. Maybe you need someone to brute force puzzles. Maybe you need someone you can rely on for random encounters with enemies. It all depends on what should an exploration character do for you and what is your go-to team combination. I've been Yasuo, and if you'd like more Genshin related content, check out thegamer.com and maybe subscribe. Thanks for watching.